All right, can you hear me? Are the headphones comfortable? Then we are ready. I need you to take the screen and look at it. Place it so it corresponds with what you see in front of you. Now, when the picture moves, you move along. Got it? Very well. From the Greek tragedies comes the concept of catharsis, cleansing, maybe even liberation. It was Aristotle who coined the term, and simply put, catharsis expresses the idea that the spectator of a tragedy will go through a process of cleansing or purification through identification with the fall of the tragic hero. For a while, the spectator forgets herself. It can also mean relief. When you put up a mirror and let her forget herself, but at the same time see herself in someone else, live through someone else, something inside her is set free. Her sorrow is released. That's the idea. Through identification with the reflected figure's ruin, the spectator is detached from herself. Then she can cry. She can feel. It's a positive effect. It means to somehow empathize with the fictional character, and through this with oneself. Aristotle probably wouldn't put it that way, but I would, and owe a bit to Freud. So, are you ready? Then listen. Try to follow me with an open mind. Relax and let me do the work. I will count down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Start walking. It's a few years back in time. My back felt heavy against the velvet couch. A mild rain had been pouring down monotonously all afternoon, and I was trying to drift off. I hadn't been able to sleep for several days and felt nauseous. The apartment I had borrowed was rejecting me. Everything seemed so decadent and overwhelming. The painted walls and huge mirrors everywhere. The many books and stacks on shelves. Endless room with wide and coarse plank floors. It was a place where life should be lived. The dresses belonging to the flat's real owner were strewn about the place. Silk and woven fabric, candlelights, high ceilings. The apartment gave the impression of a social and intellectual and significant life. Empty bottles of red wine. The cultural and economic success it indicated. When I tried to inhabit the rooms, the floors creaked under me and let me know that I didn't belong. My steps felt unnatural, self-aware, and I slowly languished, constantly finding myself wrapped up on the couch, staring. Sleep wouldn't come. I was chain-smoking and sat behind the smoke. Took a book and turned over the pages with no awareness of what I was doing. Just try to force time ahead, if that makes sense. But then all of a sudden I noticed this sentence. I really saw it, and it was more than just reading, it somehow struck me. In my heart there was a kind of fighting. Just then, on the unfamiliar velvet couch, with bare feet and dressed in a terry bathrobe, the square outside visible through the pouring rain. Light fell in wide beams from the windows. There I was, in the light from the grey sky, in an old bathrobe with Hamlet in my hands. In my heart there was a kind of fighting. A pressure against my chest. I put the book away. But later, in the night, when I was about to go to bed, I picked it up again, lethargic, distant. The bed linen hadn't been changed for a long time. I had lost weight since I'd arrived in the foreign city and winced under the duvet in the cold light of the desk lamp on the bedside table. I arranged the pillows up against the wall. It was October and a cold night outside. I adjusted the radiator. Then I started reading. For the next couple of days, which invisibly turned into weeks, I wasn't able to shake Hamlet off me. I was smoking in the flat, my skin appeared more and more dead, the dishes piled up. The same pressure in my chest. I only went outside to go to the library. The endless shelves of books on Shakespeare, I drew my fingers over their backs. I devoured the books, the historical ones, the academic ones, the different variations of the plays. I began to draw the characters, the murders, the deaths. Ofelia. The long blonde hair, conceding gestures. The resentment that life isn't all that you wanted it to be. And whilst confused sentences rushed around in my mind at night, I had a feeling of two cold hands against my body. A voice who whispered to me, "Remember thee? Sir, in my heart there was a kind of fighting that would not let me sleep." From the corner of the room the desk lamp illuminated a limited area, a hard yellow cone. I was cold. My mind was constantly busy and I started taking notes on small pieces of paper, which I put up everywhere in the flat. I looked for connections. "Ofelia has no will of her own," I wrote. In the play, where Hamlet has so much character, personality in fact, she's in comparison almost impossible to grasp. Like a blank expression of the will of others, an emptiness. To begin with, she's full of hope and in love with Hamlet, up until her father questions her honor, questions Hamlet's intentions. Ofelia and her father are walking with their heads thrust forward, not looking each other in the eye. They are walking down a gravel path in the flower garden, and he asks her to, even orders her to stay away from Hamlet. She must reject his advances. She sighs. She makes a few objections. But she obeys, and in that she's a little girl. Her father is the greatest man she knows. How old can she be? 16? A weak-willed and pretty girl, flushed rosy cheeks, blonde hair, a submissive personality. "If thou didst ever thy dear father love." In the play the young female is empty in herself. Maybe that is why she commits suicide. When the people who define her turn away from her, she's nothing at all, though for once she acts on her own account. So she goes to the lake and drowns herself. What she goes through must have been terrible, but also an incredible humiliation, as it is actually not because she is prohibited to see Hamlet again, but because her father is proved right that she takes her own life. Their love wasn't true. Hamlet doesn't love her, and everybody can hear it when he yells at her, and she begins to hate herself. How could she be so stupid to believe he loved her? She's nothing, a girl with a body. She's ashamed. He yells at her. The humiliation that everybody hears it, and that she for a short moment had let herself believe that maybe it was her, Ofelia, 16 years old, who had driven him mad with love. If Hamlet really wanted her. But he tells her that he doesn't. He asks her to leave and never return. He tells her to become a whore or a nun. She stands there, left behind, warm-cheeked, her heart pounds heavy in her chest. Now there's no life left to live. Only a choice between two roles that she can't play, then rather avoid it all. Ofelia has no imagination, she has no strength to free herself from their image of who she is. Their image of a woman. And when her father dies too, the authority she can rely on, she goes insane. Not like Hamlet's staged insanity, but a complete and real insanity. She becomes the little girl she really is. Returns to her childhood, goes back to the time before her breasts grew, before men could be anything other than fathers. She picks flowers, sings rhymes and songs. The life of the grown-ups, the corruption of men, it is not for her. It's a martyrdom, and perhaps it's a rebellion as well. To stand outside society, to withdraw from it by withdrawing from life. Long it could not be till that her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay, to muddy death. Ofelia by the water illuminating her pale face with green light. Her hair unfurls in the wind. She picks flowers and sings. She walks into the lake. It says her garments drink the water. They get heavy. She lies down in the water. She floats like a water lily, is taken by the currents, while she sings. Her garments drink the water, get heavy. Perhaps it's better not to exist. She sings. The water draws her down like two hands. There is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. I never started to feel at home in the apartment. It was a constant reminder of a life I didn't lead. I couldn't live up to the promise it made. I had started to sleep again, but in a troubled manner with many dreams. In the dreams I looked at myself in the mirrors and didn't recognize the face looking back, her long blonde hair. I woke up screaming. 2 cold hands against my forehead. One morning for the first time I put on one of the many silk dresses in the apartment, white and frail. I looked at myself in the biggest of the brass mirrors. The thinness and illness made me beautiful. Then I opened the heavy wooden door to the hallway and stepped out in the bright spring sun. I had to blink and walk down the tortuous street down to the canal. Sat down on a bench. Reflections from the water's ripples sent sunlight into my face. I closed my eyes. I felt drunk. Completely alone and drunk. Had a cigarette, then one more. Mist over the city, a quiet moment. And then my voice rose. At first it was a thin sound, but then it grew louder and louder. I sensed nothing besides the rising sound. I emptied my lungs and sang as loud as I could.